Continuing on the theme of apologists for Islam in their mythologization of the Quran and the paradoxical popularity of Islamic resources, especially owing to a morass of social media outlets, this video will look at whether the Quran stands to real scrutiny for some of its biological statements as claimed by some of these proponents, as well as other popular Islamic sources of misinformation. These ideas, bogus though they may be, have immense superficial plausibility. They have enormous cultural influence as they are believed by enough people to make the claimants have very comfortable livings. Quran 51:49 says Allah has created all things in pairs. The Arabic word kulli is used as a quantifier to indicate totality or everything, thus leaving no doubt what it means by the verse. But from a biological point of view, this is simply not true. Just taking some animals as an example, there are those that have only one gender. An example is the New Mexican whiptail, which is only found in the female gender. They are able to self-reproduce without a male in a process called parthenogenesis. This process also happens among some types of birds, snakes, lizards, scorpions. The list of animals is quite long. Further, other living organisms do not come as two separate genders. Rather, their gender is based on environmental determination. An example are oysters. They are neutral and change their gender throughout their existence. Especially of the invertebrates, hermaphroditism is common, meaning they possess both male and female reproductive organs. The list is not exhaustive. This trait is applicable to snails, earthworms, barnacles, slugs, amongst others. Hermaphroditism is also found in some fish species and to a lesser extent in other vertebrates. Quran 13:3 talks about plants and fruits of every kind made by Allah in pairs. Again, the word kulli is mentioned to mean every, therefore it implies no exception. However, many plants do not come as pairs, as they are able to reproduce asexually. Examples include dandelions and potatoes. Fungi, which were once classed as plants until recent times, also reproduce asexually. Nor do all fruits come in pairs, as the Quran claims, with many being either just male or female. Others are monoecious, therefore parthenocarpic, meaning they contain the stamen, the male reproductive part producing pollen, and the ovules where fertilization occurs. Examples are included here. Quran 7:189 suggests humans were initially created from a single person when it says, "He is the one who created you from a single soul, and from it made its spouse." This gives the idea to an abstract form of parthenogenesis. Modern biology does not suggest this is possible amongst mammals, as humans reproduce sexually. This extends to all humans in history without exception. Quran chapter 19 verses 19 to 23 onwards describe Jesus' virgin birth. Believers can call it a miracle or a supernatural event, but they cannot claim it is biologically possible, compatible with modern science, as they do selectively for certain other verses, then erroneously concluding that the Quran is a book full of biological facts. Islam teaches Adam's spouse Eve, who is called Hawa in Arabic, was created from his rib. This is why Islamic sources describes women as crooked, because they were created from a rib. Quran 15:26 says humans were created from a black clay-like substance. No serious biologist anywhere will agree with this description of human composition. The idea that humans were created from mud or clay is found in ancient pagan religions many years before the advent of Islam, such as the Egyptians. Here is one such research found in this book called The Oxford Companion to World Mythology by Princeton-educated scholar Professor David Leeming. It is also mentioned in the Britannica. Quran 29:14 says Noah preached on earth for over 950 years. These accounts are mostly taken from the Bible, where the Ark story is also found. The Quran also mentions Noah taking on it every species and its subsequent survival. However, none of these accounts are compatible with modern science. Quran chapter 18 verses 9 to 26 talks about a pre-Islamic Christian legend of the sleepers in the cave. Quranic commentaries state they remained alive in a state of slumber in the cave for over 300 years. Scientifically, the oldest person ever recorded has been at 122 years. This is still way short of human longevity as suggested in the Quran. In a few places, dead people and animals are brought back to life again. Quran 2:259 mentions how a man and his donkey were brought back to life again after 100 years. And Quran 2:72 talks about how a piece of a cow brought a dead man back to life again to reveal his murderer. Nothing further needs to be added about this. Quran chapter 24 verse 24 says on the day of resurrection, tongues, hands and feet will testify against them. Scientific research does not suggest that this is possible. At this juncture, Muslims will be quick to claim that these are symbolic references, figurative language, a metaphor that is describing witness testimony. But when read in the light of Hadith literature and its connection to the happenings related to the day of resurrection, where inanimate objects such as trees and stones will grow eyes in order to see and grow tongues allowing it to speak, it does make one question whether the Quranic references are actually meant in literal anthropomorphic terms or merely symbolic. Quran 12 verses 93 to verses 96 says Joseph's father's eyesight returned just by him smelling the garment of Joseph. This is another non-scientific statement which falls outside biological rationale. Although eyesight restoration is possible these days with the advancement of medicine and science, there has been no case study where someone has been cured of blindness just by smelling a garment, as the Quran suggests. Quran chapter 27 verses 16 to 23 onwards mentions how Solomon commands supernatural beings called jinns. He also has the ability to communicate with animals such as birds. He is described as speaking with a hoopoe bird and thereafter desiring to execute it when it was tardy to his assembly. Here in these ensuing verses, Solomon talks to ants, birds and jinns. Modern biology does not suggest humans have this ability to communicate and command animals in the way Solomon did. Moreover, with supernatural beings called jinns into the mix, none of this is yet to be proven by science. Muslim scholars such as al-Mawdudi mentions in his commentary of the Quran that due to embarrassment, some Muslims have resorted to changing definitions and meanings of the Quran to give it a more rational and modern twist. But these interpretations are rejected by him. In actuality, these fanciful stories in the Quran draws from Jewish folklore emphasizing Solomon's grandeur and magnificence, complete with his flying carpet and talking to ants, which has been subsequently incorporated within Islam/Quran as part of its divine texts. This was insinuated by Muslim scholar al-Mawdudi as shown in the previous slide. Quran chapter 16 verse 66 affirms that milk is produced in the body somewhere between excretions and the blood. The mammary glands where milk is produced and stored are not located near the intestines, which is where excrement or feces is stored. The Arabic word in the Quran for excrement here is farth. This has been translated correctly in other translations shown here, but rather beguilingly and incorrectly as digested food by the popular source Quran.com. In fact, feces is not digested food, it is the opposite. It is the solid or semi-solid remains of food that was not digested in the small intestine and broken down by bacteria in the large intestine. Furthermore, the mammary glands extract nutrients from blood to produce milk. In other words, it is derived from the components of the blood. This is because the glands extract water, fats, sugars, and proteins from the bloodstream and process them to create milk. In précis, the blood plays a direct and intrinsic role in milk production. It is not separate from the process, as the Quran implies. In addition, the milk is infected with bacteria and other microorganisms. Therefore, many kinds of cattle and goat milk need processing or pasteurization before they can safely be consumed. Not to mention that the majority of the world's population of humans are lactose intolerant to some degree and are therefore unable to digest milk without experiencing abdominal bloating, cramps, flatulence, diarrhea, nausea or vomiting. These realities appear to challenge the Quranic notion that milk is pure and pleasant. Quran chapter 6 verses 143 to 144 says there are 8 animal stocks, 2 male and female, of sheep, goats, camels and oxen. However, there is no mention of those animal stocks outside of Arabia, such as reindeer, alpaca, yak, buffalo, llama, etc. Quran 39:6 repeats the 8 cattle theme again. To get out of this dilemma, Muslims will have to admit that the Quran, and by way of extension, Allah is limiting his audience only to the Arabs within Arabia, or have to concede Allah was not aware of these other livestock outside of the Arabian Peninsula. Also, from a definitional and purely scientific nomenclature vantage point, the term cattle specifically refers to bovine animals such as cows and buffaloes. Sheep, camels and goats do not fall into this category, as the Quran seems to include. So in conclusion, it was clearly shown how the Quran makes repeated claims and statements that fall outside biological rationale. Apologists for Islam conveniently omit or obfuscate on these issues. Instead, they take advantage of the availability heuristic and recency bias of their targeted audience. This is significantly impacted by the beatification of social media by Muslims, often fronted by charismatic individuals flooding the internet with flashy, easily digestible, erroneous misinformation. Frequently, the scientific content and actual experimental evidence is brushed over and replaced by uninformed didactic statements due in large part to their own ignorance of the subject, thus contributing to an infantile, pervasive sense that the scientific advice they are providing is somehow correct and predicated upon the Quran, thus appealing to their audience's credulity rather than skepticism. It is not the spectacular individual accounts that are the problem, but the constant grind of imbecilic little ones. If these arguments were made by a protagonist for a religion other than Islam, the very same people will display a healthy natural skepticism. But when it comes to their own religion, this fervour is rather conveniently misplaced. And in the case of science, the skills to critically appraise a piece of scientific evidence on its merits is often lacking. But as it panders to their confirmation bias and impressionable emotive concerns, they readily accept the information hook, line, and sinker.